Now, it's time for today's perspective on the programme. And my guest on the programme today describes himself as a rootless wanderer who's travelled across Australia, been a film extra in India, a journalist covering the Shining Path War in Peru, drug running in Colombia, and several military rebellions in Argentina. Our rootless wanderer does have one base, New York, from where he commutes across the world to work still as a journalist and also to research his now 6 books, including his most recent. It's called Cuba Libre, Che, Fidel and the Improbable Revolution that changed the world. And Tony Perrottet joins me now here on set. Thanks very much for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
God, that list. I mean, it's a bit of a list, isn't it? You're not someone to settle down and stay in one place, are you?
Well, I think New York is the perfect place for someone who wants to be travelling all the time, because the place is changing constantly. So I go away for a week, there I come back and it's completely different, my neighbourhood in the East Village. So I think that's sort of where I've learned to hang my hat.
I mean, the bugs that you've got, it's about travelling, isn't it, very much? And it's about writing as well?
Yeah, history, really. It's the way the history survives in various places. I was brought up in Sydney and studied history at Sydney University, and it struck me that historians never actually went to the places that they were writing about. And I did a book on the ancient Greek Olympic Games, and I was struck that no one actually went to Olympia to find out what it was like to travel around, for people to go there, the spectators, the athletes. And when you do that, it sort of brings things to life in a different way.
What you need is a time machine, then you could really go back
That's that's actually what I try to do with the books, in a way. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the latest book on Peru, concentrated very much on the Castros and Che Guevara. I mean, managing that incredible task from the very small beginnings to then grow and overthrow the US-backed Batista regime.
Yeah, it was such an amazing story. I was living in Argentina and writing about South America, and everyone's always thinking about Cuba in some way or another. And so I went there in the 90s when it was at its lowest ebb. It was sort of a disaster. And then from New York, I went in 2016. I was invited on the first flight from Miami, the first private jet from Miami to Havana. And it was like, oh, this is a new era. And I asked a friend who was a Cubophile, can I get a little book, a slender little book that will tell me about the revolution? Because I wasn't going to learn about it in the United States. I wasn't going to learn about it in Havana. And she was like, it doesn't exist. You should write it. I was like, OK, that seems extremely improbable, but anyway. So I went there, and it became much more... I sort of became engrossed in Cuba, and the Smithsonian magazine sent me to go to the actual places where the events occurred. So I discovered that, for example, Fidel's base up in the Sierra Maestra still existed, his rebel guerrilla base. So I hiked up into the Sierra Maestra to find all the cabins. They're all still there. The sites where the battles occurred are there, and the Cubans are really quite into the history. So that's where it all started. I thought, OK, I can do a book on this.
And the book's very much, isn't it, about actual life for the people who were actually there. I mean, how on earth do you manage to piece that together?
It's surprisingly, there's a lot of letters, there's a lot of archival material. There's you can go into the archives there. They have a beautiful archive that Celia Sanchez set up, Fidel's lover and the main organiser. And she made a point of getting people's letters and all the messages and putting them in jars and burying them around as the war went on, and then they dug them up after the war. And so there's extraordinary letters, little missives between Fidel and Che, and they had their little diaries that they wrote. They were very literary characters. They were very well educated and college kids, and they jotted down everything. They would jot down recipes when they were travelling around. Raul Castro came up with chorizo a la guerrilla. He decided how to get to chorizo, slice it very, very, very thinly, saute it in honey and rum, and that became their favourite dish when they were up in the mountains. Weird little details like that, and if you put it all together, it brings it to life.
And do you think you really managed to understand as well the real motivation? I mean, obviously you understand why people went there in the first place, but to actually camp out there in the situation that they were in?
It was kind of an extraordinary moment, because and the idealism, I think, is what has and the self-sacrifice is what has been lost in the 60 years that of Cold War chaos that sort of enveloped the whole thing. At the time, there was just a bunch of young dudes and gals who just decided to do anything they could to get rid of this dictator, Fulgencio Batista. And you have to sort of admire their dedication. Fidel was sort of deranged in this. It was kind of insane. This incredible self-confidence. No matter what went wrong, and everything went wrong, it was a complete disaster. They crash landed. They all got ambushed. At one stage, Fidel was with 2 other guys sitting in a sugarcane field for 5 days, rocking back and forth. And Fidel kept saying, "We're going to win. We're going the victory is near. And his friends were like, this guy, he's lost it. Fidel's lost it. It's all gone. And from these incredibly improbable beginnings, they just kept going and going, no matter how often they were knocked back. And I think that's kind of the fascinating thing. And Che Guevara as well, who was just an Argentine doctor, young guy in his early 20s, just signs on and discovers he has a talent for guerrilla warfare and leadership, as well as being incredibly handsome and great fashion sense. Becomes the poster boy of the revolution.
I mean, I love the humour in it as well. I mean, just to give a bit of an example to the viewers, one of the chapters is called Love in the Time of Diarrhea.
Well, one of the things that struck me was in this beautiful diary that they gave me in the archive, they're always talking about their bowel movements. And so this obsession. And Che was a terrible chef. And, for example, he cooked something at one stage. Everyone, the whole bunch, all 12 of them got diarrhea. And they actually, there's a spot named the Diarrhea Hill in the mountains in the Sierra Maestra.
Where next, then? Presumably onto your 6th book. You must have another one lined up.
Well, I'm surviving Paris. Tonight I'm giving a lecture on this in the American Library. I should throw that in. They were very keen for me to mention that somehow. But I don't know. Books these days, you need to sort of absorb one book before to move on to the next. So I was recently in Japan for the first time and realising how one-dimensional the view of Japan and Japanese history is. And once you get into that, then you can find the characters, and then something there might work.
OK, I think he's got his antennas out. If you know Tony, or you don't know Tony, but you know his books, perhaps you've got some suggestions for him.
Please do.
You never know. Thanks very much for coming in to talk to us. There's the book, Cuba Libre. You'll find it, I'm sure, at bookshops, and you can find out a lot more about the Cuban Revolution. Thank you very much for talking to us, Tony, on the programme today.